I've read this many times, and I've preached out of this many times, and you've heard many others preach out of it, and you've studied it probably yourself many times. But when I look at this text, I find, you might say, like a microcosm of our day in this. When you look at this, it kind of tells us all about where we're at now. I understand this was not us. I understand this was not directly to us, but principles apply here. Examples apply. And David said in verse 1, "Help, Lord." He starts off saying we're in trouble. "For the godly man ceaseth, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. They speak vanity, every one with his neighbor. With flattering lips and with a double heart do they speak. The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips, and the tongue that speaketh proud things. Who have said, with our tongue will we prevail. Our lips are our own. Who is Lord over us? For the oppression of the poor, for the sighing of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord," capital letters, Jehovah. "I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him." Thank God, I'm glad we have a safety zone, a fallout shelter with the Lord. "The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. The wicked walk on every side, when the vilest men are exalted." I don't know how you could not say this is not like our day. It so fits our day. The only difference is, seems like to me, that most people have not recognized it to the point of bringing themselves to verse 1 to cry out to God. And in fact, rather than crying out to God, they just disregard it as being of the norm today. But man has always thought he was better than God, knew more than God, and would overcome God, and has tried to do that before, and to be equal with God, but that's not going to work. Morality and crime and unimaginable things are today's normal. Think about that, what I just said. We're so used to hearing it around here, but just think about the statement that I've said and the Scripture said. Immorality, crime, and unimaginable things. Reminds me of the Scriptures where the Lord said that every imagination of man's heart was wicked continually, never rested. If there ever was a time when God has, seems like, presented us as a nation with a little bit of a breeze, maybe of grace for a little while, a little door perhaps of revival, maybe in some way, form, or an opportunity to stop and say, well, wait a minute, it can change. It did change. Maybe yesterday would have been a good time to validate that, or to agree with it, or to continue that on further. But yet, we didn't do that. We partially did, we barely did in some cases, but not very well. But even in a day, as I mentioned earlier, of obvious progress in many areas, and the primary one being, as far as I'm concerned, was the spiritual aspect of it. There's been more prayer in and around that White House in the last 2 years than there's been, and I don't know when, including George Bush, by the way. It's just been a time of recognition of God and recognition of the Bible, recognition of what's right and what's wrong. And we've been studying about what God's wisdom is and what it is not for some time now on Wednesday night. And actually this still falls in its place And yet man says God's wisdom is not good enough. We want to have it our way. Look at verse number 1 of this little psalm. Little short psalm, but my, what a powerful word of God that God has kept for us to understand. In verse number 1, there was a recognition by David that something had to be done. He said, help, Lord. In that statement, help, Lord, was an acknowledgement that he could not do it. He could not get it done. We ought to get to the place in our lives, in every avenue of our life, where we're crying out to God, help, Lord. When we look at our children and our grandchildren and our friends and neighbors and wish and pray that that we'd love to see them saved and talk to them, invite them to church and love to see them come to church, to no avail most of the time. And even when they do, it does not last, or they only visit once and they're on their way. You know, we ought to be crying, help, Lord, because we can't do it. We ought to be crying to help, Lord, when it comes to making the right decisions, because we obviously are making the wrong decisions. I mean, as a whole, of course, there's some that are. But something happened here. David was a man after God's own heart. So everybody wasn't wrong. Everybody wasn't in the ditch or backslid or not trying to serve God. But there was a reason that David made that statement. He had wider vision than tunnel vision. He saw the whole picture. And he said, when I see that, all I can say is, oh God, help, Lord. And he calls out to God, the Jehovah, L-O-R-D, capital letters. The only one that is able, powerful enough, the great I am, the one that can get it done no matter what it is, nothing can stop it. He said that only God can fix what is wrong. And I must say tonight that only God can fix. There's no evangelist going to come along. There's no preacher going to come along in themselves that can fix anything more than another one preaching the same gospel. God may choose to use one versus another in a different way, but it's the God of glory that makes the difference. If you remember when God was going to destroy this world, it wasn't Noah that suggested for what God to do. It wasn't Noah that said, you've got to do something. It was God that said, I'm going to do something, and therefore, Noah, you found grace in my eyes. Why? Because Noah did not have the answer. Noah was living amongst that, in the middle of that, but he walked with God. And so did, I believe, David here. But I have to believe also that probably Noah was saying, help, Lord, also, though it's not recorded, because you can't live amongst an ungodly domination of people without it affecting you, without you saying, help, Lord, or either joining them. And we certainly don't want to join them. And it certainly breaks our heart. But verse number 1, notice what it says. He said, help, Lord, for... And that word for ties the next statement to the help needed. For the godly man ceaseth. You know what David said? The root of all the problems that I'm seeing is that godly men have ceased. That's exactly what he was saying. He said out of all of that comes forth all those fruits of ungodliness, but the real problem is that the godly man has ceased. And I want to say tonight that in our country, even in our Georgia, our Bible Belt where we're at, the godly man has almost ceased out of existence. It's not because some are not saved, I believe, but it's, I believe, so much like perhaps Lot was, that got so used to the world in Sodom and Gomorrah that he blended in with them. And we have blended so much now that you don't find anywhere except in the New Testament, you wouldn't even think that he was saved had not God said that he did, that he vexed his righteous soul in seeing and hearing. But it also said he vexed his righteous soul, meaning like he put a spell on it, like he put a chokehold on it, like he clamped down on it. And may I say to you that this world is trying its best to choke us down, to shut us up, to stop us from being godly. If there's one thing people make fun of you now, is when you give God the glory for everything. People don't like that. They want man involved. You separate yourself from the world, and they tag you with some kind of a weird tag that has nothing to do with it, but they just don't like you. The real world is when you separate unto God, you're separating from the world in order to separate unto God, and therefore you're rejecting them when you're going closer to God, and the rejection they don't like. But the Bible said, love not the world, neither things that are in the world. If any man love the world, then love of the Father is not in him. It's easy for this flesh to love the world. We have it inside of us. All of us have this old nature here that we deal with. We drag it around all the time, and it's constantly battling with us. And the more that we get associate with the world, the more we accept the world. That's the reason the Lord said, come ye out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. Because association, 1 Corinthians 15:33, be not deceived, evil communications corrupt good manners or morals. And therefore, when we get to that place like we're in today, there's so many that have been corrupted. And David said the problem here is that we need help because the godly man ceaseth. Now listen, when your desire is for the godly man, you don't have no one else you can go to but Lord. You can't go to the Pope. You can't go to the preacher. You can't go to anyone else. You can't go but one place. The only one that controls spirituality in God's sense is the Lord himself. And he said, I see the problem. Godly men have ceased everywhere. And he lifts up in his voice and he says, help, Lord. He recognized where only his help could come from. He said it was the Lord. He said he's failed. And he said not only that, said the man ceases, but the faithful fail from among the children of men. Faithfulness is absolutely out the door in our day. Man has no allegiance, and I say spiritual allegiance in this sense because just allegiance is not enough to follow God. You got to have more than allegiance. I have allegiance to this country, that flag. But it goes deeper than that with the Lord. It's in here. And he said, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. He said, I don't only see the godly men ceasing, but I believe in actual context here he's saying, because of that, they are becoming unfaithful. Unfaithful is a symptom, a big symptom of falling away and the worldly ways of the world and sin in the world. It's mentioned in the last days, perilous times will come, and it's mentioned there. It's mentioned all through the Bible in that sense. When you get away from God, when you fail to see men that are godly men, the influence of those men are gone from the next ones coming up. I've heard, I don't know how many preachers say, and I heard last night some of them saying something along the line of... Actually, I think it was Laura Ingraham, which I happen to like, but Laura's usually pretty straight telling it like it is. She said, when all these older politicians die off, older ones, we lose something every time because the new ones are not coming up. And I said, that's exactly the way it is in the church. It's the way it is in families. What used to be the norm is also now just about extinct. It's about gone. Because we hadn't been cultivating that. Nothing new's coming along to fill the places of it. And yet, therefore, The product of that can't possibly be but a society like we live in. And I've talked to people like this before, and somebody said, well, I don't understand what you're upset about. Nothing, it's a good life. Everything, they don't get it. They didn't see it. If you just look at the world, and I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful for all I've been blessed with, for the comforts that I have. But spiritually speaking, we're in trouble. And as a result of that, we're seeing troubles just emanating all out through different areas of social life and everything that we have. There's no faithfulness in marriages anymore. Most of them don't even marry. They just shack up. Or even shack up for a while and then marry, if they ever marry. And even the ones that marry don't stay married. They end up divorcing, because in some cases, I know that's beyond some people's help, but I know a lot of times, the marriage was based not on love, but on lust. And a marriage based on lust will never continue. But David said, I'm just going to call it like it is. He said, you say it's good and all. I know that I can call on God, I can pray, I'm right with God, but I'm going to say it like it is too. We're in trouble. May I say to you tonight, I'm not discouraged, I am not defeated, but we are in trouble in America. Verse number 2. The product goes out. Notice how the degenerative effect of the godly man ceasing. The faithful fail. And then verse 2, they speak vanity, every one with his neighbor. With flattering lips and with a double heart do they speak. I put a little note in my Bible, parentheses, politician. If that's not a description of how the average politician speaks, I don't know what is. But worse than that, it's also a description how a lot of people in the house of God also talk in a way that they speak, rather than acknowledging the truth and the problems that we're in. You look at this and you see the way I'm preaching tonight and you think, boy, I don't need this negative. It's the real world. It is what it is. And again, I'm telling you this because I'm trying to encourage you that even though this is taking place, we are more than victors in Him that loved us. Look at verse number 3. He said, the Lord shall cut off all flattering lips and the tongue that speaketh proud things, who have said, with our tongue we will prevail, our lips are our own. Who is Lord over us? See, David said that we've got a problem, but he said, now wait a minute, I know how it's going to end. I know that what's going to come out of it. I know that somewhere down the line, God is going to take care of this. I'm going to say to you tonight, though Georgia, where I live in particular, is bad, I want to say also that I know at the same time, though, that God is going to take care of it one day. There will come a day where there'll be no sodomites voted in. There will come a day when there'll be no more abortions. There will come a day where there'll be no more opposition to the things that's right, where people again will lift their hand to God, but it's in God's hands. And David said, I think as a positive here, God, that is the Lord, verse 3, will cut off all flattering lips. And that verse number 4 said, who will be Lord over us? We're not going to be nobody's puppet. We're not going to have nobody over us. Hello? Is that not where we're at today? We are in a rebellious group today. We've never been in a society like we're in today. Everybody is going to do their own thing. I remember years ago, I'm trying to think of, there's the cigarettes. I remember they're long, Virginia Slims, I believe was the name of them things. And they had this long, lanky woman over them, and they had some kind of phrase that doesn't come to mind right now, but basically what it was saying was this, you do your own thing and don't worry about what anyone else says. May I say to you, You better do what you do according to what God allows, or you are in trouble. You may not be in trouble with your people around you, but you're in trouble with God. You're in worse shape than you would be with them around you. But women now are rebellious. Women have their traditional, Bible traditional role was in the home. The Word of God says keepers at home. We don't have that anymore. But I will say this, our homes were better when we did. You don't have enough people around now to even hardly remember or recognize that. They don't know what it is. But I remember what it was like to have Mama waiting on you when you got there. Mama that sent you out the door. Mama that was patting you on the back or washing your face before you went to school and all them kind of things, or checking on you and doing for at home. The home was a home. It's nothing now. It's a station now where people cross when they go in their different ways in most homes now. One's going one way and one's another. The home part don't exist no more because daddies are out of order. Daddies are looking for what they want to do and without regard thinking of the home, negligent of the home. And that's in the white race. In the black race, there's an unbelievable amount of abandonment and irresponsibility. Hardly any daddies in the homes. No wonder there's so much rebellion, and no wonder there's so many things going on in the black communities, because there's been no authority. Folks, I want to tell you something. In the home, the Bible said the man is the voice of authority. And when there's no voice of authority in the home, that child is missing something that they need to have. You say, well, my husband, I had people say, well, my husband wouldn't do this. I just had to do it. You're going to get in trouble doing what your husband won't do, that you say won't. One reason he won't, because you don't let him have a chance. I've heard that for years. But God expects us to have the authority in the home. Does that mean the woman has no? I didn't say that, and God didn't say it either. I don't ever do nothing without talking with Joyce about it, and we make our decisions. I get her input. But it's my decision to make as the head of the house. That's God's order. And you say, well, I don't like that. That's not for our day. Well, you ought to get rid of your King James Bible then, because that's full of it all the way from back to front. As a matter of fact, for as a pastor's concerned, or a deacon, that they're not even supposed to be allowed to be able to hold the office unless they rule their own home well. Rule their own home well. What does that mean? It means what it says. Be in charge. But with that said, look at verse 5. We're in a mixed up day. For the oppression of the poor, for the sign of the needy. Now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him. Now notice this. This verse, boy, when I got to studying on these things, just blessed my heart. If you can sink down into this chapter here, of Psalms chapter 12. If you can find some way to detach yourself from the world, sink down into the gloom and how bad that it is, what all's going on, and get down in there where David was at and crying out to God, and then you can understand what's going on. And then verse number 5 comes up more meaning. For the oppression of the poor, for the sign of the needy. He said, I want you to know, for the pain that's been put on you, God said, I'm looking at that. God said, I see what's going on. He said, I see what you're going through. And he said that oppression, that means to put pressure on. You say you don't believe it. Well, let me take you back to the book of Exodus, when the Bible said that God looked down and he saw, and God put, he said to the children of Israel, or to Moses actually, he said, their cry has come up before me. And he said, I will come down. You know what he was doing? Responding to the cry just like David did. And David said, help, Lord. And now the cries of the people, when the taskmasters put them under more pressure, the people cried out. And folks, I want to remind you that word right there, sighing, means to cry aloud. It means that when you get to the place where you're so messed up, so you're so tired of it, you're so sick of what's going on, you just say, help, Lord, and cry out to God. And the Bible said, because of that, now I will arise. You want to get God up doing doing something, then cry out and sign out to him. But he said, what's he going to do? He didn't say he's going to stop it. He didn't say, listen what he said. I will set him in safety from him that puppeteth him. He said, I'll put you in a place where you'll be safe and he can't get to you. Glory to God. I'm glad that there ain't enough Russias or Chinas or oppositions in Hollywood or nowhere else that can get to the child of God if I cry out to him and God puts me in a safe place. I'm in a safety zone. I heard on the news today there was a tornado over there in Macon, that weather that came through here earlier today, 4 or 5, I don't know what time it was, but I thought about, I wonder how many of them, or if any of them had any safety place. And I thought about yesterday changing oil in the car up here at the Shell station, Shell place. If you've ever been there, we actually did that work, put in electrical and plumbing, heating there, but when it was built, but there's a whole room under the, everywhere there, big, humongous place under there. And somebody commented, boy, that'd be a good tornado shelter, wouldn't it? Can get none better. You're under everything. Everything go right over you. You'd be safe under there. But it's down under. It's in a place you get outside, you can't see it. The only way you can see it is find the steps to get down under there. But there's a place of safety there. It's a workplace now, but it could be easily used for that in a tight space, so to speak. But the Bible said that the Lord, saith the Lord, he said, I will set him in safety. You say, well, I'm going to figure it out. For safety reason, I think I need to be over here. Okay. How safe was Jonah on the ship fleeing from the problem? He went straight into the storm. There's so much could be said there. But what I'm saying is, when we cry out, and only when we cry out, there's a condition in verse number 5. Subject to our crying out. David proved it in verse 1. He said, I'm crying, I'm sighing, oh God, help me. And we'll never, James said, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth. We'll never get anywhere again until we get to praying fervently, God, help us. He won't change the world necessarily. He could, but I don't think he does in our day like that. But I tell you what, he'll change your world. He'll put you in a place of safety. Notice what it said, from him that puffeth him. You know, when can't think of his name, one of the congressmen or something, anyway, was out to eat with his wife, and a bunch of heathens came up and just got in their face and started hollering at them, just right in their face. And an older man and his wife, Mitch McConnell, that's what I'm trying to think of. An older man as he is and his wife. I mean, where's the respect, period? Forget the politics. Where's the respect for treating somebody like that? But come up in his face and got right in his face. That word puffis means to put right in their face. It means just get right in their face and just agitate them, just threaten them right in their face. Speak it down on them. And that's exactly why is that? They were doing nothing but right, trying to do the right thing. And the demons of hell were sicked on them by Maxine Ignorant over yonder in California, which is now the head of a committee. God help us. But the point I'm making is this. God said, you don't have to hit him. Joe Biden said, if I could take him around back the building for a while instead of something else. And Trump said later, he said, I wish he would. I believe he would go at it with him. I really believe that. And if I was Joe Biden, I'd be scared to go back there. Because we know Trump ain't just blowing his mouth off, but we kind of got a feeling old Biden is. But the point is this. He said, I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him. You say, well, what does that mean? He going to step between us? Yeah, but in our day, he don't have to step between you. All he's got to do is when some heathen comes out of yonder road over yonder on First Avenue coming your way, he can send out another logging truck right in front of it and let him run right in the side of it and take him out. You don't even never know it, and God's already took him out of your puffing at you. I wonder how many times God has removed that from me, if he ever has. I know that he's been with me and took care of me. Look at verse number 6. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation from forever. He said, thy word. My, thy word. If there's one thing this world does not want, it's thy word. That's the very reason there's so much of the new versions coming along of your Bible today to destroy your Bible. But it's not going to ever happen. They're not ever going to be able to get rid of it. They try, they want to, and some foolish so-called preachers will stand in the pulpit and preach out of a perverted Bible, quoting verses that you can barely recognize, and all of a sudden you think, well, I see what it is, but it's so different. It don't even have the same meaning. And by the way, there's no spiritual unction to it when it is read. This old book right here, there's something God's anointing on it, and it'll touch you. But verse number 8, the wicked walk on every side when the vilest men are exalted. David said, Lord, if you don't do something, he said, we're going to be covered up all around us with the vilest men. And by the way, that's not all Democrats. I believe it's the majority, but there's a lot of bad Republicans. There's a lot of bad independents. And sadly to say, there's a lot of bad so-called Christians as well in our day. But David said, Lord, if you don't help me, with the godly men ceasing, we don't have but one end result. Where we're at today didn't start with Obama. You hear me? It didn't start with Jimmy Carter. But it started a long time ago. Matter of fact, before this country was even discovered, it had already been in action against God. And the forces of wickedness just found their way more and more and more and brought us to the place where we're at now. You say, well, how can you say that we're walking, wicked men are walking around us? Here's how. I'm just going to mention 3 or 4 things that you've heard this week probably, but bear with me. When a Georgia candidate in the middle of the Bible Belt can be not only a Democrat, but an ultra liberal, not even logical sense of a sane person, be the party's prime example to lead this state, we're in trouble. When a candidate promotes abortions, even to the place of a child breathing, that's absolute murder. Any of it, but specifically, it's like super, if there is such a thing, super murder, or in-your-face murder. But that's not what bothers me. I tell you what bothers me every time I looked at that Abrams and Kemp sticker. So much percentage in reported. And there was that number right there. And here we are tonight out of the state of Georgia with 62% of the, registered voters in Georgia. 62% of registered voters in Georgia that they're within 60,000 votes of being even Steven. How in the world can that happen, folks? There's preachers there's churches lined up in Georgia everywhere you go. There's not a place in Georgia that is not, and there's some places it's not that way, but in Georgia, they're everywhere. I mean, everywhere. The internet's full of preachers. And yet, I can understand how one idiot can come out and reveal herself as being how stupid she is and how bad she is and how crazy she is in her thought. I can understand that. But I don't blame her for where she's at. I blame all of them that voted for her to put her in that place. Why? The wicked walk on every side when the vilest men are exalted. We've had so many vilest men exalted, change the law, push this, push that, change this and change that, to where now it's an accepted thing. I've said 1,000,000 times from the beginning, familiarity breeds acceptance, and we have come to the place where we accept all this mess as norm. It's not norm. When she stands up and says we don't need guns, when she stands up and says who needs agriculture when you can go to the farmer's market? Duh. I mean, is that dumb? Forget the Lord and forget all the other things. That is just stupid. And as many people voted for Kemp, voted for her, almost identical. So when you go out there on the road, you're going to meet 50% of people nearby that are stupid as a box of rocks. She wants us in Georgia, of all places, to be a sanctuary state. And the worse than that, she wants you and me to pay for all that they've come in. And yet, I'm struggling. I didn't mean to say that, because I didn't want to say that. Let me back up. We're struggling today. Everybody's struggling today. Veterans are still struggling today. And all kind of people have needs today. And yet we're going to have people come in marching in and just give them the house. While our own people are starving and doing without. And making us that are starving doing without pay for it. Ugh. Why? How can that be? How can that make sense to nearly 2 million people in the middle of a Bible Belt? This last night was the first time we voted a Muslim woman as a congressman, a Muslim congressman. The demonic forces never come in a tidal wave. They come in one by one, and they creep in unawares, and they grow. The governor of Colorado tonight is a full-blown queer, publicly announced practicing sodomite. And if I could say it, that's a thimbleful of the ocean of sin that we live in when we got an ocean full. And you say, preacher, why should we say, help, Lord? My goodness, folks, we're in big trouble today. You say you're overreacting, Brother Sam. You're going politically crazy. I'm just going crazy because things are messed up. This man, David, forgot about everything else. He forgot about all the things he wanted to do. He went crazy, and he just said, help, Lord, help me. And he sighed. He was hurting. He cried out to God, help me. God sent us a revival. If we don't have a revival, some form or another, we're in trouble. It's going to get worse. I understand that. I'm trying to tell you that to tell you this. Though God painted this picture, and God painted this picture, I didn't paint it. And God painted this picture for us. The Bible says the Old Testament was written for our example. And He painted this picture to remind us that though it is bad, He's still in control. He's still in control. Now, I want all of you that's way back yonder to get up here close where you can see this screen up here. Just go and get up here. Don't mess around and argue with me. Just get up here. There was a preacher by the name of Dr. Clarence Sexton. How many of you have heard of him? I know you have probably. Yeah. All right. He's a real well-known preacher, loves God, speaks the truth. He was asked to come and preach at a meeting, and I want you to get up where you can see it now. If y'all have to get on up here in the front row, it ain't but just a brief thing I want to show you, but I want you to see it. He preached a message on revive us again. And down toward the end of that message, he made some statements that are very brief, but I want you to hear them. I want him to give them to you, because it was his unction, it's his word from the Lord. All right? So before you play it, Chris, let me cut off the light. I want to see it good.